Okay, ladies and gentlemen, for our returning viewers, welcome back to Roberts & Co. For those of you that are new here, I'm jeweller Barry Roberts, and we manufacture jewellery here in London and ship it all over the world, so welcome to London. Today, I'm going to share with you a little behind the scenes of our jewellery making process, and in particular, our hallmarking process, because I have here a batch of pieces that we've had hallmarked and returned to us by the Goldsmiths Company Assay Office here in London. Now, it's at the time of me filming this is actually the beginning of March, and this is the last batch of hallmarking we had done last year. I sent this at the start of December. It would have been on the 4th of December. They got it on the 5th. The estimated completion date was the 12th of December, which would be the standard processing time. However, busiest time of year. I don't think they invoiced this until about the 20th, and we got it back with days to spare before the Christmas holidays. So I would say, broadly speaking, I'm very much in favour of the hallmarking system. It protects consumers, but it also protects us as manufacturers as well. It protects the industry as a whole, or it certainly aims to. However, there's no such thing as a free lunch. There are pros and cons to the system, and the time frame the time it takes is one of those cons. People are not getting more patient, and if you tell someone at the beginning of December they may not be able to get it until January, it's not the news they want to hear. But we'll go over more of the pros and cons of the process as we unbox this. But that's what I want to focus on, is the practical aspects of hallmarking, because there's so much information available, good information available about the history of hallmarking and the theory of hallmarking, but there's very little in the way of the practicalities of actually doing it as a jeweller. So that's what I can share with you, and I wish there was more information available when we were starting out, because it's actually quite a tricky thing to do. Stamping pieces, I mean, I've been doing it a very long time, and it's a highly skilled job. They do a fantastic job at the Goldsmiths Company Assay Office of marking pieces. Usually. I've had some mishaps, but you know, they're much better at it than I am. I mean, there's some cufflinks in here, and I've got a couple of scrap pieces which I will show you. I didn't mark them, I destroyed them. So yeah, it can be a tricky thing to do. So that's what I want to share with you, is the actual practicalities in the process. I will briefly cover the history and the theory, but we'll go into more depth into the practicalities of it and the process from a jeweller's perspective. Now, we're here in the UK, so we have to abide by as jewellers, we have to abide by the General Trading Standards laws and the Hallmarking Act of 1973 and its updates, amendments. I should say this is not intended in any way to be legal advice. It's not going to be legal advice. It's going to be our experience and how we go about hallmarking and our interpretation of the Hallmarking Act. I'll go over that in a little bit more. And as far as history goes, the marking of precious metals is one of the oldest, if not the oldest, known form of consumer protection still in use today. Archaeologists are digging up precious metal pieces with what would have been the predecessors to what we know today as hallmarking. There are different systems available and have been available in different parts of the world. Here in London, the process we go through today of hallmarking, and we use the Goldsmiths Company Assay Office here in the City of London. They can trace the origins of that process. You can trace back to the year 1300, so it has a 700-year history. I actually have the Memorials of the Goldsmiths Company books here. And these two volumes here are just the history of the Goldsmiths Company Assay Office from the year 1334, when not a great deal happened. These two volumes only go through to the year 1815. I mean, these were actually published in 1896 and 1897. But yeah, that's from 1334 to 1815. We've then got another 200 years on top of that. The reason I've got those is I actually had an issue a number of years ago. I was making some reproductions of some antique cufflinks, and the original ones they were basically two, I can't remember if they were oval or rectangular. I think I was making both actually. So they were the two discs or plates. I actually got some there. So they were the two of these. They were silver. So they were the two parts of the cufflinks connected together by a chain. And the originals had a hallmark, or I thought they had a hallmark, on both parts of the cufflink. So I sent them in with our maker's mark on both parts, requesting hallmarks on both. I got a phone call saying we can't mark a piece twice. So I was like, okay, fine, just do it once. But I told them I was reproducing these antiques, and it was done on the antiques, and they said, send us a picture, because if we've done it before, we're not sure what we've done before, but if we've done it before, we should be able to do it again. So I emailed them the pictures, and they were like, that's not a full hallmark on both sides. It was a full hallmark on one, and then just the maker's mark and a part they called it a part hallmark. So it was just the maker's mark and I think the leopard's head on the other. So it was a part mark. And they were like, we can do that. And I asked them if they knew what that was called, because for when I want to do them in the future, we don't know. We don't know what that's. We just know, it's a part mark, full mark and a part mark. We don't know what the history of that is. Or they could find it, probably. Well, I could. So I got these to see if I could go through there, but that's 500 years worth of history to go through and try and find an entry in there, if it's even in there. And it probably isn't, because it was probably post. They were definitely, like all the ones I've seen online were post 1815. So I probably need the next 200 years of hallmarking history to try and find what the idea of that behind that was. Probably they just wanted more money at that time. It's like, right, they've got to be done twice. And the jewel at the time was probably, oh no, I don't want them done twice. I just want them done once because it's going to cost more money. And when I tried to get them done twice, they're like, you can't have, no. Anyway, that's the history. We could make hours and hours of content going through hundreds of years of history of just hallmarking in London. And there's obviously it's been done all over the world for centuries. So when it comes to the Hallmarking Act, going back to the Hallmarking Act, if you're obviously a jeweller and you're planning on being a jeweller here in the UK, you should probably have a copy of this and be familiar with it. The key takeaways, I would say, on page 21, part 1, permissible descriptions for non-hallmarked items. I see a lot of people not quite complying with that, not to throw anyone under the bus. Gold is permissible if qualified by the word plated, silver is permissible if qualified by the word plated, and it goes on to say, how it should be applied, whether it should be in the size of the text and description. There's obviously a lot of more information than what I've just read, but you can download this and print it for free or read it for free. Another key thing, which not a lot of people here in the UK are aware of, is part 2, exempted articles. Now there are a lot of exempted articles there, mainly bullion and component parts, which we would call findings. But there is a slight issue with public perception of hallmarking here in the UK, and that is for many, many years the assay offices have done a pretty good job of convincing the public that everything needs to be hallmarked. And it really doesn't. Most things aren't. Most things don't, because there is a very large exemption, and that is silver. There we go. What is the actual word? Which contains silver, minimum finesse, and is less than 7.78 grams. So silver weighing less than 7.78 grams doesn't legally require to be marked. It does require to be what it's described as, which is minimum 92.5%. Gold, the exemption is much lower, 1 gram, and platinum is 0.5 grams. So pretty much most things in platinum do need a hallmark. It's compulsory. Gold, 1 gram, so a lot of earrings and our small 1mm band rings do not. But yeah, that exemption on silver is a bit of has caused us issues in the past, because I mean, even like we had tie clips, which we do to protect ourselves. We do actually have a lot of things that are below 7. We have most things actually that are below 7.78 grams hallmarked just voluntarily. I think that I'm pretty confident the pieces in there don't legally need are exempt. The guitar picks are probably exempt, but we just get it done because it's as a feature almost. But what we had had it quite a lot with tie clips. So we did the tie clips fully hallmarked, and obviously there's a cost and expense. But they weren't just they were fully hallmarked and hand polished. Then we would have them unhallmarked and just machine polished, because we were competing. I think that was competing on eBay. So no one else had theirs hallmarked, and they were, you know, way less expensive. So to compete, we gave up with competing in the end on eBay because people would sell stuff at a loss. But anyway, that's a different story. But yeah, so we would send them out without a mark, and we would get angry emails saying they're fake, not real, because they need, you know, that everything needs to be hallmarked. So we started stamping them 925, no problem. Like people, like, because they've put, over the periods of time, people have put 2 and 2 together, so they will go and buy jewellery from a reputable retailer, and it is sterling silver and it's marked 925. But that's not, a 925 mark and a full hallmark are 2 different things. But they're putting 2 and 2 together, that they've bought this silver from a reputable jewellery company. It's got 1 mark in it, 925. So they go, well, that's a hallmark. So we were stamping we can stamp things 925. The public will accept that as a hallmark. It's not. It's a mark. It's a finesse mark. It's not a full hallmark. It's not hallmark full stop. But yeah, because the assay offices have told everyone that everything needs hallmarking, they do not mention the exemptions. Very rarely. The public have put 2 and 2 together. They've bought stuff. It's got marks in it. They're not hallmarks. They now perceive a 925 mark as a hallmark, so you can actually get away with, and we do. We as a trade get away with mark. You can't. It's very difficult to sell something without any mark, without getting people questioning it. You stick a 925 mark in it, no one questions it. They accept it as a hallmark, which is a problem. Let's face it. It's and that's because they've been misinformed by the people in charge of it. The only way around that is to tell people, you know, is to ask people, you know, is to promote the fact that it's not, well, even make it compulsory on stuff that on certain, which I don't think is a good idea, and I'm not calling for that, to reduce the exemptions, but you know, call for promote like some of our pieces that don't require hallmarks are hallmarks, and that should possibly there's got to be a way of promoting that, rather than misleading the public. But not that we just state that they're marked 925. We don't state that things that are not hallmarked are hallmarked, just marked 925. So, you know, the description complies with, they're not misleading. It's not us doing the misleading, it's the people, the people that are policing the Hallmarking Act are doing that. And yeah, anyway, enough about that. What we need to do is unbox our batch of hallmarking and take a look at that. Also, I'll share with you, we've got a load of, in our sophisticated storage tin, our old sweetie tin, we've got a lot of the different sizes of hallmarking punch, because some of these pieces have different size stamps in them, from absolutely massive to absolutely tiny. The one that just dropped there is swan neck, which is designed for hallmarking, for putting our maker's mark in rings. So it's swan necked, so you can put the ring inside the cutout. What we will actually do on many occasions is stamp the ring if we can before we form it, rather than using the ceramic if we can. What I want to do actually is upgrade our storage solution. Someone sent me this wooden box, so I think that would be perfect for storing our hallmarking punches. We're upgrading from an old plastic sweetie tin to a nice wooden box, so we'll do that, and we'll go through a little bit more of the hallmarking process. So yeah, let's unbox this batch. So before we unbox this latest batch of hallmarking, one thing I need to do is share with you our Maker's Mark punches, or our sponsors marks. For many years I've been keeping them in this old sweet tin, and recently someone sent us a nice wooden box with some tooling in, and I'm going to reuse that to store not only our Maker's Mark punches in, it's perfectly oversized because when I'm preparing a batch, and it's more economical to send batches for hallmarking than individual items, when we're preparing a batch for hallmarking we keep the projects waiting to go in the box with the punches. I'll talk more about pricing later, but the bigger the batch, the more economical hallmarking becomes. Okay, I think I just need to clarify a couple of things at this point. Why are we doing the hallmarking, not the assay office, and why have we got so many different sizes of punch? We're not doing all the hallmarking. There are multiple elements to a hallmark, one of which is the Maker's Mark or Sponsor's Mark, and that's all we apply. Then the pieces go to the assay office with our Maker's or Sponsor's Mark applied, they're tested, and then all the other elements of the hallmark are applied by the assay office. And the reason we've got so many different sizes is different size pieces will have different size hallmarks, and they have different recommended standard sizes of hallmark for different articles of jewellery. And that will become a little bit clearer when we unbox our latest batch, because we've got some rings with quite small hallmarks, and then we've got some guitar picks with quite large feature hallmarks. And having all these different sizes of Maker's Marks means we can, to some extent, specify the size of hallmarks when they're featured, feature hallmarks. Also, there is the option to have the assay office apply your Maker's Mark, so you don't have to do it yourself. And again, there are pros and cons to that. The pro is they're fantastic at doing it. They're better than I am. They're straight. they're really accurate at putting the pieces dead centre, whereas we're not so much. But I think that's it's almost like an artist signing their work. I think it's quite a nice feature that we've hand stamped our Maker's Mark into each piece. Like we've actually put our stamp in each piece in an artistic way quite often. However, there's cufflinks in here that I did, and the way I've developed putting our Maker's Mark in a lot of pieces, I've got some small fly presses and some big fly presses, and they're great for doing batches. But what I'll quite often do is use a hammer and the punch, and when you see the guys in the assay and the girls in the assay office demonstrate hallmarking, they get a club hammer and give it one wallop and it's done. I tried that. That really didn't work. What I will tend to do is do a number of light taps. That makes it sound like I'm hammering in a nail into a piece of wood. They're quite deliberate taps, but I'd say 4 or 5, and I'll kind of rotate the punch a little bit so we get an even imprint, because quite often when I'm using the fly press it will go in, it doesn't even have to go in that slightly wonky, but you'll get one end deeper than the other, or you know, the top deeper than the bottom, and it is noticeable. So one of the reasons to put your own marks in, the primary reason I feel, is it gives you more control over the location, to some extent, the location of where the hallmark goes. Because obviously as jewellers we're making pretty things, and our choice of positioning for the hallmark will be primarily for aesthetic reasons. In the case of a feature hallmark, we'll want it in a very prominent position. In the case of some other pieces, you know, like rings, that the best position might be completely concealed, which could be quite a challenging spot, and left to their own devices, I'm pretty confident the best place for the assay office to put a hallmark is the most practical and the most convenient. So it gives us some, putting our own maker's mark in. One, I think it's just quite a nice touch that each piece is stamped by us. If you get the assay office to do it, there's an additional charge, and it gives us some control over positioning. But I think if it was, if you're after machined precision, getting the assay office to do it is probably the best option, and possibly lasering rather than hand stamping. I always try to go for the most traditional, which is hand stamping full traditional marks. But some of the elements are optional, and you can have part marks done. The reason I don't often go for lasered, I will have some earring posts lasered because it's just not practical to stamp them with a punch and destroy them. But with the lasers, the technology is always improving, but right now it's quite a thin, it's quite a shallow mark. You just show it to the polishing machine and it's gone. And they quite often come back, it looks like a burn, it's lasered, so it quite often is burnt black around the edges of it, and even trying to polish that off. If you use an actual polish, you can machine polish that off in a barrel or electromagnetic polisher, and it looks fine. Still somewhat burnt, but fine. If you try and polish that off on a polishing mop, gone. So let's get on with unboxing and inspecting this latest batch of hallmarking we've got back from the Goldsmiths Company Assay Office. Now this is quite a small batch. The bigger the batch, the more economical the process becomes, but you'll find a full price list of the costs associated with different sizes of piece and the different services the Assay Office provide on their website. This batch cost us £138.12 for those of you that are interested, and that is, there's a fixed charge of £19. There's 48 items that cost £1.20. There are some feature hallmark pieces in here which cost £3.50 each, return postage plus VAT, grand total of £138.12, and obviously we had to send it in as well. Now prior to sending this in, we had to register our business with the Goldsmiths Company Assay Office, which we did many, many years ago. We had to buy the Maker's Mark punches. We didn't buy them all at the start in one go. It took us many years to build up that collection of punches. We bought them as and when we needed. They're not inexpensive. Back when we began, you were sent a pad of hallmarking notes, or paper ones. You had to fill them in with a pen and paper and send them in. They were triplicates actually. Now it's all done online. It's a very easy process. We just tell the assay office what we're sending them in advance, enclose paperwork. I think it's done on QR codes. Enclose the paperwork that we print off, and yeah, minimal paperwork now. It's all done online. It's quite an easy process. You'll find out more about that on their website. Here we have a tie clip, a gold tie clip, standard size hallmarks on here. Done a very neat job there. That's going to need minimal cleaning up, but we do need to turn that piece of sheet effectively into a tie clip first of all. Forming, we send it in that form so it's easier to hallmark. If we sent it in as a fully formed tie clip, it would make it quite challenging to mark. These rings, 9 karat gold, I think these are 2x1mm wedding bands. Very neat marks in there. Oh. These are going to need minimal work. Now they've been hallmarked. They were pre-polished and sized before they were sent. We're just going to need to check the sizes of them, make sure that the marking process hasn't altered the size. There's a potential that it could have enlarged them slightly or misshapen them slightly. We'll make sure these are the perfect sizes they're supposed to be, and each one will need polishing, but minimal resetting required on the back sides of the marks. So we sent in a batch of 9 karat and a packet of 9 karat. The different metals are kept separate. A packet of 9 karat gold, and there is another packet of sterling silver. It looks like we've already ransacked this, so it looks like we mixed up. We had to send in a piece of solder, so that I was wondering what that was at the beginning, but that is the solder for the cufflinks we sent in. If something's going to be quite challenging to hallmark, you can send it in. It's allowable to send the pieces in component parts. More about that in a moment. These are guitar picks. We do a number of different sizes of guitar pick. This one has a standard size hallmark. It's still a feature. The hallmark is still a feature, and it's something we promote in the description of the products. So full traditional stamped marks. These do need quite a lot of work. It doesn't look like they do, but we've got to flatten out the back of the mark. It will then need rubbing down with emery to get the backs nice and flat, and then polishing. And flat sheet requires a considerable amount of polishing to get a mirror finish. So it will take longer to polish those than it did to make them. These would require even more work. These are guitar picks with feature hallmarks, so oversized hallmarks. There are different variations of this. We've sent in an image from their website of the mark we wanted. We sent that with them, and they've done a really good job. They're actually larger than the ones before, which is great. Bigger the better. So we could have actually done with making our maker's mark even bigger on these, and next time we will, if they're going to make their marks that oversized. But as you can see, these are going to require going through our flatting press. We'll need to actually flatten them back out. It's quite a brutal process, the stamping process, when you get to this size. So these will need flatting out. They'll need quite a lot of rubbing down on the reverse of them with emery paper and polishing. Obviously you have to be quite careful with the setting back process, rubbing them down with the emery, and the polishing process, because although we want a mirror finish on the front and the back, we need to be careful not to remove the detail of the hallmark, which is one of the benefits of traditional stamping over it being laser engraved. The lasers are generally much shallower than the traditional stamped marks. We generally only have the laser done on earrings because it is so easy to polish it out. But if you've got finished pieces, it is a great option. If the pieces are already pretty much polished, finished, ready to go, it's obviously way less destructive. These are a batch of barbell cufflinks we sent in. This was a sample we sent in, which was already hallmarked. So this was just a sample for whoever at the assay office was going to do the stamping of what the finished article is going to look like. These are the bar aspects. So we applied our maker's mark on these. It's actually quite tricky to do on these round pieces. We messed a couple up. We destroyed a couple of these bars in the process I destroyed a couple of these bars trying to get our maker's mark in there. It moved and it literally just sort of smudged the mark across around the bar. Now, I was kind of hoping that they would have put their mark closer to our mark, because there's very little room for the solder to flow up the bar the way it's been done. We've got to be very careful and precise with the soldering. There's when I'm putting two 10mm bars on here just to see how close the marks are to the bars. I actually marker pen the lines on when I sent them before we sent them, sent the sample, so they were fully aware that the mark needed to be between the lines, so when we solder the balls on, the marks are visible. The reason we send them in component form rather than as finished pieces, the balls are semi-hollow. So if you were to try and hallmark these, if you were to try and hand stamp these assembled, the chances are you dent the balls. Well, not the chance, it's almost guaranteed that you will dent the balls in the process. It would be I'm not saying it'd be impossible, but it'd be a labour of love. If we were to send these in assembled, this would be a good case for having them lasered. If we could solder these together beforehand and send them in and get the hallmarks lasered on the bar, it would be a better option for a fragile item than hand stamping. However, as we're the manufacturer, we can send them in component parts, but we've had to send in even the solder as well. So all of the component parts need to go. Even the solder we're going to use, which is the packet I opened at the start, even the hard silver solder has to go. Every single component part that is going to be used is sent in. If we're sending earrings in component parts, we have to send the backs as well. Everything goes, they're marked, and then we can then assemble them. Now, if we were buying these in, if we were a retailer just buying these from a manufacturer, then finished, and we weren't the manufacturer, obviously lasering would be a good option for something like that. That's they're actually quite robust when they're assembled, but they're not robust enough to withstand a punch and a club hammer. Very few things are. You can see the amount of deformation on those that the process causes on those guitar picks. It is quite a force to get the stamps in. Okay guys, I hope you enjoyed this little look behind the scenes at a part of our jewellery making process and a part of the hallmarking process. Now all of these pieces we've got back will need a little bit more work before they're ready to go into stock and ultimately to go to customers. The gold rings we'll need to check the size of them, that the hallmarking process, the marking process hasn't altered the size of the rings. They will all need polishing as well, final polish. The tie clip will need the hallmark setting back. We'll need to pre-polish it, then form it, and then final polish it. The silver pieces will need a lot more work. The guitar picks will need the hallmark setting back. We'll then need to emery the reverse side of the hallmarks to flatten the surfaces. And then they will need a lot of polishing. The polishing a flat sheet takes time. It will actually take longer to polish those guitar picks than it did to make them. The cufflinks will need assembly, then soldering. We'll need to be quite careful with the soldering, the heat control of those. It would have been nice if the hallmarks were slightly more central, but they'll be fine. We just need to be really careful that the solder flows around the ends, the beads, not the bar, and ensure that the solder doesn't flow into the marks and obscure them. The interesting thing about this batch is now all of the gold pieces weigh more than a gram, so they all, here in the UK, they all require hallmarking by law, compulsory hallmarking. None of those silver pieces do, I don't think anything there weighs more than 7.78 grams, so we don't they're exempt. So, under the weight, so they don't need to be marked with anything. However, as I was saying earlier, if we sent them out plain, which we could, it would save time and cost. Legally, they'd comply with the Hallmarking Act because they're exempt because they weigh less than 7.78 grams. If we were to send them to customers, because the assay offices have educated the public, they've done such a good job educating the public believe that everything needs hallmarking. Generally speaking, they've put 2 and 2 together and come up with 925. So what we would have to do from our experience is, if we sent them out with no marks, there would be questions and complaints. If we were to mark them 925, which we've tried with pieces, there are generally speaking, no questions, no complaints. The public will accept that. Rightly or wrongly, they will accept that. Well, the pieces would, they are sterling silver. They don't require a mark. We mark them 925. They comply with the law here in the UK. So that would be right. The public perception would be of what of the marks and what they are would be wrong. The reason we choose to have them marked, which is an additional expense. There's a number of reasons we do that. One, I think it's nice to give customers that option. It's a nice little detail that the pieces are fully hallmarked here in London. It's a little piece of history, I suppose, as well. The hallmarking process here in London has a 700-year history, so it's a little piece of that. We've tried it out with different pieces. Some customers on some products see value in that, others don't. For finger rings, for ladies' finger rings, the customers, generally speaking, were not prepared to pay a premium price for a full hallmark over the same design ring, just marked 925, at a lower price point. and I mean the difference was significant. Like I think I've still got the original batch of wedding bands, silver wedding bands that were marked 925. We hardly sold any. We sell 925 ones all day long. Less than 7.78 grams. With things like tie clips, cufflinks, and the guitar picks, the hallmarks are a feature. The sales of those significantly outstrip the ones simply marked 925. And when we tried selling any of those without any marks at all, no end of complaints and questions about where's the hallmark, which all go away when you mark them 925. But the other reason an additional reason, we have an issue occasionally with plating, and not us plating our pieces. Well, I believe that's what the issue is, because it's hard to tell from customers' descriptions, but I'm pretty confident that's what the problem is. So when we sell customers sterling silver, a feature of sterling silver is that in certain conditions it will tarnish, which is a layer of silver oxide on the surface, and it can accelerate under. It's a natural aging process of sterling silver, and sometimes it's actually deliberately done to pieces to antique them, or as a decorative finish. You'll quite often see bracelets or chains that will have that black inside and then they're polished on the outside, and that's often done deliberately as a feature. However, in certain conditions, you spray chemicals or perfume or go swimming and don't dry the piece, or just sometimes atmospheric conditions will accelerate that process, and it's unwanted. People don't want their silver to turn black, they want it nice and shiny. Now, what can happen as well is customers will have pieces from global reputable brands, household names, and they'll be wearing that piece, and our piece of polished sterling silver, our piece will, in certain conditions, could, if the conditions are right for sterling silver to tarnish, whether they're in high humidity and they've got it wet, and the conditions have to be right, but our piece will start to tarnish, start to discolour. This piece from a global reputable brand doesn't. They will have questions, understandably. Like they will accuse, and generally they will accuse us of selling them fake silver or something. We'll get that angry email, and it's hard to comment on other brands. But what I'm guessing has happened is that if you're having, most of it's mass produced somewhere in Thailand or Indonesia. It's great, and I'm not knocking that. They're state-of-the-art factories, and they produce fantastic. They mass produce good quality pieces. However, as part of that process, if you're going to mass produce pieces in a factory in Thailand, it's then going to be in storage for a while. It's then got to be shipped globally. If it gets here to the UK, then going to be in a distribution centre. It then might be moving around stores. By the time if it were polished in the factory and left in its natural state, by the time it even gets to the UK, let alone it's then moved around the UK, it's going to be black. It's going to be like that. Just the time frame alone is going to start to discolour, and then if it's flying, different atmospheric conditions, if it's not stored correctly, the tarnish process is going to begin. So you've either got staff in your shop polishing stuff with a cloth, which they used to do back in the day, but I'm going to guess a lot of this mass-produced stuff now, there's going to be surface finishes, platings, or they're going to pacify the surface somehow to tarnish. It's an additional cost. It's not done to mislead the customer. That it's not. The stuff will be sterling. The pieces will be sterling silver. They'll be high-quality pieces, but they will be plated or pacified somehow, really for practical reasons, for storage. However, then it's not declared. It doesn't. That's a can of worms with plating. A lot of it doesn't legally need to be declared. We could rhodium plate them and not tell anyone, and it would still comply, I believe, with the Hallmarking Act. I mean, nobody like, you go to the high street and all of the 9 carat white, certainly the 80 carats, all of the white gold engagement rings, I'll get in trouble with the all police, but the most of it will be rhodium plated or plated in some way to enhance the colour. And it's never the first the customer finds out that their engagement ring and wedding ring art plated is invariably when it wears off, changes colour, and they're then told that, oh yeah, you're going to need that serviced every couple of years, replated basically to maintain the colour, or you can just leave it sort of, you know, grey. I'm laughing, but it's not funny. It's not funny having to deal with that, and I can't. Yeah, we will quite. It's again, that's something we quite often have to deal with. If we'll send someone natural, we'll quite often send out natural white gold, and it does differ in colours. If they've got something that's ultra rhodiumed, then our stuff does look grey. Natural 18, especially 18 carat, but 9 carat less so. But you know, 18 carat compared to rhodium is slightly grey. It's like the difference between steel and chrome. There's a difference. We've got to try and explain that to customers, which is not fun. But yeah, anyway, back to the, you know, like if a customer's wearing a piece from a reputable global brand, that doesn't change colour and ours goes black, there's questions. And if the piece is fully UK hallmarked, it makes the conversation slightly easier. It's like, you know, because if it's not, and you're trying to explain that, even we're getting an AI to explain that, you know, tarnishing is something that silver does, there are ways to prevent it, it's not harmful to the silver, it's not harmful to the wearer, it just needs to be cleaned off with a cloth, and if it's really bad you can use dips. It does happen with age, but certain atmospheric or chemicals or swimming and not drying, there are certain conditions that will accelerate the natural aging process of silver. Try and explain that to a customer. They've often already made up their mind that we've sold them something fake because they've got this other piece from a reputable global brand that hasn't tarnished. They've often just want to fight about it from the get-go. If the piece has been fully hallmarked, that means it's been independently tested, checked, and then hallmarked. You know, and they can verify that. It makes that conversation a little bit easier, and actually, it makes it a lot. It does make that conversation a lot bigger. So that's again another reason why we will have things. Why we will opt to have things hallmarked, even though it's not legally necessary. But also going back to the beginning, I also think it's just a nice feature to add, and I'd add it to everything if we could. But some, you know, it does add time, it does add cost, and on some pieces the customer just doesn't see value in some of the more competitive. Some of the things that are more competitive, very competitive on price, so silver band rings and things like that, the customers generally just don't want to pay the additional cost for that. They're happy to have pieces that can be Mark 925, Mark 925. We've tried the hallmarking them and offering them both, and the results were clear. But like I say, on pieces like tie clips and cufflinks, it went the other way, and the customer it was a feature the customer valued. So yeah, I'm sure in future we'll get more batches and we can go into more and more detail on various designs and more about the hallmarking, and maybe at some point we'll venture in deeper into the history in these books. But I hope you found this insight somewhat useful, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon. Toodles.